No. That ache in your chest is not as noble as you think it is. You keep calling it love because that sounds cleaner, holier, less humiliating. But what you are really mourning is stranger than that, sadder than that, more embarrassing than that. You are not standing in the ruins of a person. You are standing in the ruins of a story you built with your own starving hands. That is why it hurts in such a distorted way. Not because they were extraordinary, not because they were irreplaceable, not because heaven carved their name into your bones. No. It hurts because your mind took fragments, little crumbs, half smiles, half promises, a few warm nights, a few careful words, a little attention when you were lonely, and from those scraps, you built a cathedral. You hung stained glass where there were only windows. You called convenience devotion. You called emotional dependency destiny. You called inconsistency depth because you did not want to admit you were kneeling in front of confusion, begging it to become clarity. And now that the performance is over, you sit there shaking, whispering their name, when the truth is that what you miss most never fully existed. You miss who they seemed to be when your hope was doing most of the work. You miss the version of them that arrived only in flashes, only when it benefited them, only when your silence, your tenderness, your loyalty, your patience made them feel large. And your heart, poor thing, does not know how to grieve illusions without feeling foolish. So it keeps calling the illusion by their name. You think you miss their voice, but listen carefully to your own memory and you will hear something else hiding underneath it. What you miss is the ritual, the tiny ceremony of checking your phone, the quick rise in your chest when their name appeared, the private theater of anticipation. It is not always the person that leaves you trembling. Sometimes it is the routine they trained into your nervous system. Morning messages, late night confessions, those little questions that made you feel chosen for 5 minutes. The fake tenderness of, "Did you eat?" from somebody who could not even protect your peace for 1 honest week. People become addicted to patterns and then swear they are in love with souls. A man misses the woman who listened to him during his hardest month, but what he really misses is the feeling of being seen when he was invisible to everyone else. A woman cries over the one who understood her, but what she truly misses is the private relief of not having to explain every wound for a little while. A son misses a father who praised him once in a blue moon, not because that father was deeply present, but because the child inside him still kneels for approval, like a beggar waiting for a rare coin. The routine becomes sacred because the wound is old. And once your body ties relief to a face, it begins lying to you. It tells you that the source of relief must be precious, must be rare, must be meant for you. But relief is not proof of love. Being soothed is not the same as being safe. Being wanted in moments is not the same as being cherished in truth. This is why people crawl back to what hurt them. Not always because the person was magnificent. Sometimes because the body remembers the schedule of comfort and panics when the medicine stops. And you keep romanticizing the hand that fed you crumbs because your hunger made every crumb feel like a feast. Let me tell you something uglier. Sometimes you did not even fall for them. You fell for what your own mind projected onto them. That one lands badly, doesn't it? Because it means part of this heartbreak belongs to your imagination. It means you were not merely deceived, you collaborated. You saw a little softness and painted a whole character around it. You heard one honest sentence and treated it like evidence of a beautiful inner world. They sat beside you when you were breaking, and suddenly in your head, they became loyal, deep, safe, rare, misunderstood, special. All because your exhausted heart wanted somewhere to rest. You know how this happens in ordinary life? A coworker defends you once in a meeting, and your mind starts writing poetry about integrity. A distant relative remembers your birthday one year, and you suddenly imagine hidden affection that was never consistently there. A person speaks gently after months of coldness, and your heart rushes to crown them merciful, instead of asking why gentleness only arrived after distance, guilt, or fear of losing access. Hungry people become excellent fiction writers. Lonely people become architects of false depth. The neglected become brilliant at turning tiny gestures into proof of grand meaning, because grand meaning is easier to bear than random emptiness. You were not stupid. No. You were aching. There is a difference. But pain can still make a fool of perception. And once the illusion hardens, every new contradiction gets explained away. They're just stressed. They're scared. They've been through a lot. They don't know how to love. Maybe. But pain in their past is not purity in their intention, and damage in their history does not magically make your suffering a duty. At some point, the honest question is not whether they had reasons. The honest question is whether the person you kept defending ever truly existed outside the shelter of your explanations. And if the answer shakes you, good. Truth is supposed to shake loose the lies you were using as blankets. The cruelest delusions are not built from constant affection. They are built from inconsistency. Yes, that unstable rhythm you called chemistry, intensity, connection, mystery. People talk about heartbreak as if it is always born from great love, but so often it is born from unstable reward. Warm today, cold tomorrow. Available when you pull away, distant when you lean in, tender when you are about to leave, absent when you begin to trust. That pattern can make the human mind kneel. It turns ordinary attachment into obsession, because the soul starts chasing the return of a feeling it was never allowed to keep. A husband who rarely praises his wife, but suddenly becomes soft after she stops trying, can trap her in decades of emotional gambling. A woman who disappears for days and returns with tears and apologies can make a man bond not to peace, but to the relief that follows chaos. A friend who humiliates you in jokes, then later pulls you aside and says, "You know I love you," creates confusion so sticky it starts imitating intimacy. And then you sit there telling yourself, "No one ever made me feel like this." Of course not. Stable people do not make you feel like emotional withdrawal and emotional rescue in the same hour. Stable people do not train your nervous system to confuse unpredictability with depth. You did not miss a calm home. You missed the rush before the door opened. You missed the trembling before the message came. You missed the possibility that maybe this time, the version of them you wanted would stay a little longer. That is why losing them can feel like losing oxygen. Not because they were oxygen, no. Because they kept teaching your body to panic first and breathe later. And once panic and relief come from the same person, the bond becomes chemical in a very human way. The mind starts calling the pain meaningful, because admitting it was manipulation, neglect, fear, or selfishness would force you to grieve not only them, but your own willingness to stay. That is the part people avoid. It is easier to say, "I miss you," than to say, "I became addicted to hoping you would become who I needed." But one sentence keeps you asleep, and the other begins to wake you up. There is another reason the illusion survives so long. Public versions of people interfere with private truth. You saw how they laughed with others, how gentle they sounded in front of family, how charming they were around strangers, how generous they looked in rooms where being watched mattered. A beautiful trap. Because now your pain has competition. Now every cold private moment is forced to stand beside their public warmth, and your mind starts doubting its own bruises. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I caught them on bad days. Maybe the problem is me. That split destroys people. A man comes home to indifference from the same wife who glows in public gatherings and posts polished affection where everyone can see it. A daughter receives silence from the same mother who is praised by neighbors as patient, smiling, deeply caring. An employee is quietly undermined by the same manager who gives speeches about teamwork, kindness, and respect. The performance confuses the victim because cruelty becomes harder to name when it hides behind social grace. And then the memory of leaving them feels wrong, almost sinful, because how could someone so admired, so polished, so publicly gentle be the source of your private emptiness? Maybe because some people do not need to be evil in a dramatic way to damage you. They only need to reserve their worst selfishness for places where witnesses are absent. They only need to give you just enough tenderness to make your accusations sound unbelievable. That is why you keep missing the illusion. The illusion is socially supported. It has witnesses. It has pictures. It has old messages and soft tones and selective memories. The truth, meanwhile, often lived in pauses, in the room after the guests left, in the look on their face when you needed something inconvenient, in the sudden exhaustion that filled the air whenever your pain became the subject. And because pain without witnesses feels unreal, you went back to the prettier story. Stop doing that. Stop asking the crowd who they were. The crowd met the edited version. You met the cost. And the cost is often the clearest biography a person will ever write. Nostalgia is not a historian. It is a forger. It takes evidence, trims the edges, wipes off the blood, softens the lighting, and hands your lonely heart a counterfeit memory so convincing you almost bow to it. You remember the way they looked at you during one honest evening, but you conveniently forget the week of silence that came after. You replay the softness in their apology, but the body somehow forgets how many times you had to drag honesty out of them like a bucket from a dry well. You miss the nights of laughter and edit out the humiliation, the waiting, the second guessing, the small ways you had to reduce yourself just to keep peace. This is why grief gets so theatrical inside the mind. It does not show the whole film. It shows selected scenes. It keeps the music and removes the aftermath. A man who leaves a toxic circle of friends remembers the jokes, the road trips, the noise, the belonging, but not the mockery that disguised itself as brotherhood, or the way his secrets stopped feeling safe the moment entertainment needed a victim. A woman misses the tenderness of a man who once held her while she cried, but memory politely forgets